Hello, everyone. I am so excited you're here. We will give everybody a minute or two. Oh yeah, I was gonna have music. I'm a little out of practice of the big classes since I was looking and I haven't taught one since last summer. So I'm so excited to be here with so many of you. Oh, and we're just gonna give it by my trusty playlist. And I'm sure I know a lot of your faces, and I'm sure spending just like 1 minute settling here from like the 400 people that have needed you today will not be the worst thing in the world. Just let yourself fully arrive. And while we're taking a second, maybe you can help me sound test in case we do one of the things that we might do. Can you hear me okay over this music? Okay, thanks. Thanks, all of my technical assistants. It's so wonderful to see new faces, other faces I've spent a lot of time on a Zoom screen with. And everyone that's here getting settled, you are fully adults and I love you either way. But also, if we can sit, like, if you were in a place where we can be like cameras on today, I would love that. And it is easier to imagine all of us like gathering around a primordial fire with faces. I was like, who is Ruby Richards? Welcome. And I actually know the Jessica behind the Ruby Richards. We have spent a lot of Zoom time together. All right. While we're here, let's just arrive a little more formally for a moment or two. Just let your eyes close for a couple breaths. Let whatever you have brought here today be enough, be okay. See if you can lean back from the efforting, from the fixing. And just let yourself be held a little bit in this circle. Let your shoulders drop away from your ears. And take the deepest breath you have all day. As you breathe deeply, return all the parts of you to yourself. All the energy you might have dropped off, inadvertently given to other people today. For our time together here, nobody needs you. Nothing is required of you. Just spend a couple breaths tuning into the part of you that has never changed. When you were 5 years old, 12, 18, your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, beyond. There are parts of you that have always remained. See if you can locate her. For a few moments. That through all the phases of your cycles, of your life, with all the weather inside and outside of you, there has been a part that is steady, that is constant. See if you can locate that. And as you're here breathing, see if you can use that breath to relax your belly, to relax the holding. If you can even find a little more relaxation in your posture. And when you're ready, just begin to return to the circle here. Begin to return, give yourself whatever movement you need. We are here just for you, and in being here just for you, we are here just for us. Okay, we're here. If you just arrived, thank you, Burns. Bernadette is on here and she's just taking care of me like she did when we taught at the same school as she does for everyone. Okay. If you have just arrived and you were in a place, I would love to have the cameras on. In a sense, you are participating in something revolutionary. That when we gather, when we talk about how we can thrive a little more, where we share wisdom in a circle, that's like big ancient stuff in a sense that we've lost. And I in no way am advocating that like women on their period should be relegated to the edges of society. I want you to know that like feminist blood runs wholly through my veins. And yet there is something about the like old practice of women gathering in red tents in circles around fires and passing wisdom and life experience back and forth. So while I am here with a particular set of knowledge that I have gathered and honed myself, in no way do I profess to have all of it. And I expect that there will be plenty of people on this call that have a lot of their own. And so if at any point you have like a thing, you're like, someone just asked this question and Christy doesn't know, but like, I know, but I don't want to like, yes, please. Okay. I have done a lot of jobs in the world, and teacher, I think, is probably the closest to what I identify, and a core tenet of how I believe we learn is together. So please know that your comments, your interjections, your questions, your answers are all welcome here. That said, if I can see your real hand, how many of you have been with me like on a or real life? We have done something like this together. Awesome. It's like I just planned a party to hang out with so many of my old friends and make new ones. And how many of you are here with me for the first time? Anybody? So much welcome. I am so glad that you're here. I can profess till the end of time too that like the best people hang out here. And there are few things that make me as happy as like looking at, a lot of things make me happy, but this is one of them. When I look at someone's Instagram and they follow people that like that they connected with in a space here and support each other. So I also encourage you, if you like see someone even in their tiny Zoom screen and you're like, hey, they're pretty cool, like reach out. This is a great place to make friends. So I want to start with a question, and you have to promise that you won't feel dumb if you don't know the answer. But I would love to hear in the chat if you know where you are in your cycle. That might seem weird if you're like, this is really personal information, but we're like doing way more personal later. So maybe that's a warning. Do you know where you are? And if you know, can you tell us what phase you're in? I love Dana. You can tell Dana has been with me before because she's like, summer. We're going to talk about the seasons, and some of this might be review if you've been with me before, but I have some new things that I've been mulling over. Spring, middle of it. Supposed to get it today. 2 crap fests in a row. I don't know the name of the phase beyond PMSE. That will tell us a lot of things. Perimenopause makes a mess. Yes, so we're going to talk about that. I promise you what to do when like you think that you got a handle on your life and then everything goes haywire. We're going to spend a lot of time there because it happens in the macro at like this perimenopause, menopausal time, but it also happens in the micro in our lives. Day one, I'm starting to like flat, like day 1 and 2 is my favorite because I get to think like, oh, maybe 2 days ago, Christy wasn't telling the truth about how bad her life was. That would be great. Any day now too. Okay. So we have a mix all across things. Day 12. Yes. Okay. So I wanted to preface this by telling you where I'm at. I said on Instagram today, I am in like the most follicular of phases. And by that, I mean, I am literally in my follicular phase right after my period when like, you know, when everything in the world is great and you could do anything and people are way less annoying and you like don't need like, I can't believe last week I thought I needed so much sleep and food. The life is so easy. That's where I am. And compounding that with the fact that it literally just turned into spring. Yes, Kelsey, that's exactly why I planned this call right now. Someone, Bernadette, it was Bernadette, asked like, how do you actually plan your life around this? And so I wanted to give a concrete example right off the bat. I'm supposed to be on a sabbatical doing less things in my life so I can do the things that are important, okay? And here we all are together. However, the way that I made this decision was last week we started talking about it and I had this thought which sometimes curses me. Wouldn't it be fun to I had another thought when we were at the symphony the other day. I had this like, it would be so fun to do, and it was like a big thing. And I just looked so like disgusted and sad about it. And my partner was like, what's wrong with you? I was like, I just had a really good idea. And he was like, why do you look so upset? And I was like, well, because now I think I have to do it and I don't have time to do it. And like, but with this class, I looked at it and was like, I'm in my follicular phase right now. I will still be next week. So I will have all this energy and I'll want to hang out with people. And it won't be that hard. This is stuff that I really know. And so this will give energy to my life to like gather with people and do this thing that I want to do. It won't take away from all the stuff that I want to do because I know exactly where I am. And so I did do this call. If it was 2 weeks from now and I would have had this idea, wouldn't it be fun to, I would look at like, it's going to be 7 p.m. on a Wednesday and I'm going to be like, past Christy was an idiot. I don't want to see anyone. I just want to be by myself. People are the worst. Not you guys. You guys are never the worst, okay? But other people get real annoying. So that's just like a concrete example of how I use this. Your life, like I know a lot of these faces and you have like little people that need to get driven places and need sandwiches. Or you have like students at school and they're not gonna not talk to you because it's 2 days before your period. So I want to be really upfront that I know that there are limitations because we don't live in 100-person intergenerational village where you can just be like, I'm off mom duty, see ya pals. There are limits to how you can plan your life. But for me, that's one example. I probably definitely have less responsibilities to people than the average human. So I can hermit and turtle a little more. But I also want to be conscious of like planning things that align with where I'm at. Okay, so where we're going today is a little bit sciencey. but not all the way. We're going to talk about some resources. We're going to talk about what's actually happening with your hormones. I will give you some ideas of like how you can support yourself through, but there are people who have studied and researched far more than me. So we will talk about resources if that's an area that interests you a lot. But we are really going to talk about how these cycles are reflected on this monthly level over the course of the seasons of the earth and over our lifetime. Because how many here have ever felt like 3 days before your period, you're like, I thought I knew things, but turns out I'm a broken, hopeless human being and my life feels terrible? Anyone? Yeah. And I know this and I teach this and I still feel that. However, old Christy, let's say like 25-year-old Christy was like, this is absolute God's gospel truth that my life is a waste. And this Christy at least can make some cracks in it and say like, you know, I know exactly where I am. And it might have really big implications in your relationship. So we're really going to talk too about how our energetics affect like how we relate to other people, particularly if you are in a marriage or partnership or dating. That really comes out. And we're going to talk about how sometimes these terrible phases of our cycles and what we think of our lives. I also can look out here and see people I know who have gone through this absolute like descent in their life in their 40s of like dismantling what they thought they were going to ride out on, and how this phase that often feels really terrible, like that it carries its own power and strength as well. Okay, so I want to get a feeling of where everybody is at with like, how much do you know? What do you want to know? If you were on a scale of like 1 to 5, of like, I don't know, sometimes I'm crazy, sometimes I'm less crazy, that's a 1, to 5, like, I'm pretty literate about this, but I am still always like looking for new perspectives or whatever. You're on a 1 to 5. If you want to drop that in the chat, I would love to know. Hold on, I'm just seeing if I need to answer. 4, 1, 4s. You guys are 3s, 4s. Yeah, awesome. Okay, so we have a whole range. That's amazing. Okay, I just want to first, before I forget, before I start talking and like, we're gonna do a draw. We're gonna do a giveaway. You get a year-long membership to my meditation library because we're doing fun things, because I'm in the spring of my existence. Okay, this is how I'm gonna do it. This is why I'm on my phone. We're gonna do a random number generator, and then I'm gonna count down in my participant list, and that's the winner, okay? Pretty scientific. It's the kind of science you can expect around here. Just kidding, not kidding. What the heck? Okay, I know who is the winner, but I don't even know your real name. Frozen Pears. Do you want to tell me? You are in this draw, Kristen, but you're not the winner. Do you want to tell us your real name or put it in the chat? Catherine! Yay, Catherine! Okay, will you send me, I'm totally putting this on you. Will you send me a message on Instagram or an email? And then I will link with you and get you the link for that. Awesome. Amazing. Okay, great. So glad you're the winner, except like you're all winners because I love all of you. Okay. So we have a whole range of where we're at. Okay, so this is where we're gonna start. If you've been here before, you will know what an outrageously prepared thing is happening right now. I have slides. So for my real students at school, I made slides like 3 times. It was a pretty big deal. Oh yeah, I forgot there's new people here. I taught high school for a long time and yoga, and I lived in the jungle, and I started an app company, and I've been doing this for 2 years. 3 years. 3-ish years. Gathering with the most amazing, incredible women in the world. And I started because I thought if I didn't start talking about all the stuff that I'd learned and made my life so much better, that I would die. So here we are. Just needed to head bob a little bit about how proud I am of myself. Okay, can you guys see that? Tina, you're so good with the thumbs up. Thank you. If I was a better slide maker, then you would have like notes and stuff on there, and I'd be like, don't take notes, I'll just send you the slides. But there will be a replay, so don't be writing furiously. But this is the actual like hormones of our body, and this isn't even all the hormones. I was talking with Jen, who's on here, about how even just last year, I learned that when we menstruate, we also release relaxin, which is like the hormone that lets your whole self spread apart to have a baby. And that is actually why you're way more flexible. So Jen was saying like she dislocates her shoulder. And so if you have like hip stuff that happens, or like your joints don't feel very good, it's because literally you're releasing a hormone that is sorry, I'm just trying to, that is like letting your body kind of like fall apart. Not fall apart, but just spread apart. So even that feeling of like when you feel really like bloated but not bloated, this is the thing that happens to me. I feel like I can't keep my stomach tight, you know, that it just like blobs, everything is blobbing. That's literally like the relaxin in your body just losing a little bit of structural integrity. So why I wanted to tell you that right now is we have this really simplified version of like generally how our hormones go, and that isn't even the whole picture. And chances are, I hope my sister-in-law is not on here. She'd be mad, so I was going to tell on my brother. Chances are that not even your GP is familiar with a ton past this. That's just the facts of life. They know a lot of things. Why I was asking about my sister-in-law is because she sent me a reel the other day about like a woman showing her husband how tampons work, like the applicator and stuff. And he was like, no, you're making this up. And she said like, oh, I showed it to my brother, who is a doctor. And he's like, but that's not actually how they work, right? And he's a very, very smart sports medicine doctor. And so if you feel like you are experiencing irregularities and your doctor's like, well, your hormones are relatively normal, or they just say like, that's just a thing that happens. That's a beautiful opportunity to probably look in more places. A doctor that I really like and admire, Aviva Romm. She's like a very Harvard board certified and a doula. Like often it's taking really specialized education and interest and research to actually come up with answers that are useful. There was another, and that in addition to the fact that most of the time in generalized health research, women aren't like the regular subjects. And even if they are, that might only apply for like early menstruating 20-year-old women. Whereas essentially, if you are 46 and perimenopausal, you have an almost like an entirely different body. And so for women specific health research, it takes like researching at every phase. There are like a whole crazy amount of symptoms that are very specific to menopausal women, like frozen shoulder and like autoimmune stuff that generally your GP will be like, I don't know, seems made up. So even when we look at this chart, that gives us a generalized idea, but that's not even the whole picture. So before I get even more distracted, let's look at this, and no, I'll forget. So when I say this isn't even the whole picture, one of your baseline hormones is oxytocin. It is the most important de-stressing hormone for women, whereas like dopamine and serotonin are more for men, and oxytocin de-stresses women more efficiently, generally speaking. And that's a hormone that we get from love. So whether that is in your partnership or being like this is like oxytocin fest. It would be more so if we could like feel each other and like co-regulate in real time. But even here, seeing each other's faces and talking about like stuff that we care about, oxytocin. Your pet, your kids, when you like them, oxytocin. And that actually is a baseline hormone that helps your body build these other hormones that are functioning. So it's not just this, like we can't just look at your progesterone in isolation so much, like the whole picture is much bigger. And that said, which now I just thought about all like the nurses that I know are on this call, and I'm like getting a little, but it's okay. I'm going into my expertise soon, so just like forgive me if I've made mistakes, but I think I'm good so far. Becky, don't tell me if I'm not. Okay, so we look how we count your cycle starts on the first day of your period. So another problem with these charts that I'm showing you is that they're linear, and actually it goes in a circle. Forever. No, just kidding. But we start with number 1 day is the first day of your period. And you can see on there, but it's just occurring to me, you can't see my pointing, that your hormones are quite flat. And like we talked about before, sometimes that flatness is a relief. Then we go into the follicular phase where you have that peak of estrogen. You have a luteinizing hormone preparing the egg to be released. And that has this real feeling of like building an energy. We're going to talk about the archetypes and the seasons that are reflected in this a little bit later. Then we have ovulation. That's where you are fertile, you can get pregnant. It feels like you are a Disney princess sometimes, and the world is your oyster, and little birds might land on your shoulders. and your Prince Charming is just around the corner. Sometimes. And then I can feel this. We're going to talk about cycle tracking. Don't let me forget. I can feel this without looking at my tracking the day that the drop starts. And that is the beginning, the descent into our luteal phase, where you have that progesterone increasing, your estrogen is kind of dropping, then it ebbs a little bit. That blue, oh no, where does either of these have their on there? No. Also, testosterone is playing a role. It kind of peaks during ovulation. So that's what like sparks your libido a little bit. Your sexual desire might be a little bit higher in there. That's your testosterone functioning. So that's another one that has a big job. I'm just gonna check the chat. Don't worry, nurses aren't that smart either. Thank you, Becky. Doctors aren't that smart. Nurses aren't that smart either. You're all smart, but just there are very specialized people who might give you better answers. And I don't want, because we're not going to talk a ton about kind of nutritional interventions and things like that, or like supplements, or there are people that absolutely believe in that. It doesn't always have to be so dramatic. I'm going to write a note to talk about that too. But understanding the whole picture can be the first supportive step that you can take. Because there's nothing worse than your hormones dropping, feeling like you want a cocoon, and also really believing that inner critic in your head that is bringing up all the wrong turns you've ever taken in your whole life. So at least questioning that a little bit. So when I was trying to find charts for us, I was in Pinterest, and I was like, oh, everybody's doing this. So there are a plethora of resources that can talk about what kind of fitness you can be doing during what phase and what foods can be supportive. I think, hold on, I want to go back to seeing everyone for a second. I have questions. I think Jen is on here. She talked about Alisa Vidi's book, In the Flow. Have you ever used her app, Jen?
I did use it for a bit, yes. It was pretty good. I'm not very good at using apps for very long.
No. But does it still talk about like what food you could eat and stuff like that?
Yes. Yeah, okay. It does.
Is the app In the Flow? Is it Flow something?
Yeah, her company is called Flow Living. I'm not sure. I can't remember what the app is called. Something like that, though.
Okay. Thank you. I used that briefly for a little while, a while ago, but if you really want to get into kind of the granular steps that you can take in that way. The book that we talked about, though, In the Flow, I absolutely recommend for a deeper dive into like the hormonal elements of things and optimizing how you're living. So things like intermittent fasting or like heavy weight training are not actually going to be supportive through your whole cycle. And she talks way more about like each phase in depth. Okay, that's the first one. Okay. How are we doing so far? Got questions? We're good. Oh, thumbs up everywhere. Thanks, guys. Okay, I know it's the slideshow that I designed so well. Okay, we're going back into the slideshow. How do I make you guys more? Okay, so here in Kate Northrup's book, I love this one. It's called Do Less. And she talks about optimizing your tasks for your cycle. So this person, whoever made the daily page planner, talks a little bit about that, is during your menstrual cycle, it's often a great, you kind of feel like you're in the cave. And so doing solo projects, really trying to work with what already wants to be there. And a really cool thing that happens is this is when both hemispheres of our brain are most communicative with each other. And so you actually have a lot of wisdom here to like see your whole life as it's happening, to like come up with solutions that you might not have seen before. In a lot of ways, you are literally your wisest here, but not so much you're like doingest all the time. And so looking at like, where can I leverage this wisdom in my favor? And I think one reason that looking at our cycles as a whole is so empowering is that we live in such like a glorified productivity society. And it can be really sad to like live these weeks of your life being like, I'm not good at getting stuff done. However, that part of you that is like intuitive and reflective and introspective is at her best here. And just because she's not doing all the things doesn't mean she doesn't have value. Like you may feel like you have more wisdom and intuition than a lot of the men in your life. And this is one reason, because your body makes you go into these cycles of like less doing and more being. I think maybe this is too general. I think a lot of us though would prefer to be like in that follicular phase, springtime energy forever. And we still get to monitor our energy a little bit here. Like we can still overdo it even though we have more energy. And that's one thing I heard Aviva Romm talk about actually, was that often we pay for our overfunctioning during our periods. Like they can be more difficult if we haven't like rested and cared for ourselves along the way, even though we can get away with it a little bit more. And that was a really game-changing thing for me during my actual period, that my menstrual pains went away. And this might not be your deal or your advice, but when I stopped like overfunctioning to burnout earlier, and when I let myself rest more, especially in my luteal phase, in that downturn, then my period itself was not nearly so symptomatic. Okay. And then in your ovulatory phase, we are just like actually wired for magnetism. We're like, our pheromones are going. We are literally more attractive in the world. Like other bodies perceive our bodies that way, and we like people more. And so like if you can plan to do your things, to launch your things into the world, to do your big speaking presentation here, like this is your time. And if you're dating, knowing this is also a game changer. You can field the slings and arrows of dating far more in your follicular and ovulatory phases. And then in that luteal downturn, you're like, I don't feel very pretty. I'm so sad this person didn't like me. Like there's all sorts of ways that this can come into function. And then your luteal phase, you are wired into details. and reflection and like perfecting things, refining things. And I'm sure you felt that energy in your life that you know everything that's not working in that phase. So if you can use that in your home, at work, to do really organizational things, you might be really good at cleaning a closet if you don't need big uplift energy for that. Or even just things that don't cost you so many energetic calories. Oh, I've just been, okay. No problem. You guys that are going back to work, yes, you will have the replay. Okay, we are going into the whole thing, but any questions so far? I feel like we need a little like dance movie break. That's just a lot of Christy talking. Any questions or reflections or shares so far?
Hey, I have a question. Can you repeat what you said again about the over-functioning thing? What did you say about that? That if you overfunction, that can cause the symptoms?
Yes. So, the beginning, like the first half of our cycle, you have a lot more leeway, right? Before you feel it. So I had a pattern of like, I only have to sleep 4 or 5 hours a night during this phase. And like, oh yeah, I want to do everything. And like, I don't need to eat good food because you could get away with it. You know, I'm just riding my hormones there. And so even though like the example I shared at the beginning of like, oh, I want to schedule this call, which would have felt like too much later, I'm still not overfunctioning. I'm going to go to sleep. I'm going to eat real supper. Like, so just monitoring like not letting myself overextend actually made my periods far less painful.
In simpler terms, Christy and I used to have a saying called, "You can sleep when you're dead." And that is not true. In reality, we found out later, I think both of us.
Jen and I were very good friends in my most over-functioning, unhealthy time.
Yeah, and me too. Yeah. Like we just, so dumb. And I had the worst ever period cramps. Like I had to be medicated for days. And sometimes I threw up for days. But it was just not good.
Yeah. So I really noticed that like I didn't feel it that first, second week, you know, I could kind of keep going like that. But 2 weeks later, I would pay for that in my body. Anything else?
And a little plug on sleep too, that I just discovered, which has been life-changing, is that sleep in our bodies is cumulative. This just kind of builds on what you said, but it actually takes sometimes up to 2 months for our bodies to recover from a severe bout of sleep deprivation. So kind of like nutritional, like how it takes a long time for nutrition to like work its way into your bloodstream if you're really deprived, same thing. So I thought that was so interesting. You can't just like sleep for 8 hours one night and be fixed.
Yes, which was my strategy for most of my life, but not now. Okay. Taking extra care of yourself, yes. So in those 2 weeks leading up to your period, I want to talk kind of about those seasons in a second. But in that fall, in that luteal phase, it's the fall. It's like the leaves are turning brown. Like everything feels like it's dying a little bit and we need really extra care there. But we can't even cheat the system too much earlier. Okay, no, we're good. We got to do it. Okay. We have to have a little move break for 2 minutes and then we're going to come back to like the magic best part. But I just can't keep talking all in a row. Okay, where's my Spotify? I'll send it to you maybe in the replay. I had a really nice, we still might get to it, I guess, a really nice, like, oh, if we decide to journal song, and it talks about our seasons and everything, but we gotta just move a second. Oh, here it is. This will work. Okay. We're just gonna do a little reset regulation for 1 minute. Wherever you are, there's some crap from your day that you need to move out of your body, and we're gonna do it right now. Even if it's stagnation, frustration, whatever, you can turn your camera off. I don't care. I don't need to watch you. You can stay in your chair and cheat. Well, that's not even cheating. You can move it in your chair. I don't care. Okay, ready? Oh, that's not as good. This is better. This is better. Hold on. Figure that. My heart I gotta skip Shakira. This part isn't very good.
You can't always win, 'cause I'm a gypsy. Are you coming with me? Let me repeat it. And I won't back down, 'cause life's already set me. I won't climb too young to dive, you won't push me, 'cause I'm a gypsy. Gypsy.
Okay. Maybe that's enough. If you're moving, keep moving. Could have picked a better song, but now that's probably, I don't even think that's politically correct. It's on my playlist nonetheless. Okay, I just couldn't talk that long in a row. Usually we're way chattier. Okay, we're going back to the slideshow. Keep dancing if that's what you need. Okay, so I want to thank whatever person on Google made this chart for me, because it's actually topped with yin and yang. I often use the words masculine and feminine, but that is like, it carries a load for a lot of people. And also it's really getting like TikTokified right now. You know what I mean? Like sometimes people send me TikToks and they're like, oh, this is what you mean. And I'm like, this is not what I mean. So when we talk about yin and yang, that's in terms of our energy, to be a little less loaded. And this fluctuates through our cycle, through our lives. So the yang energy is like our forward movement, active, and it's external and it's moving forward. It has direction and like intensity, and it's more logical and certain and plan oriented. Anyone felt like this element of themselves fluctuates over their cycle? Yeah, for sure. So in our follicular phase, we actually have a lot more yang energy. So this is not, we're veering off from the like trackable science into Christy land right now, okay? But I think it will be helpful. It has helped me. Okay. So in our follicular phase, we have a lot more yang energy, and it can be really easy to do those things like add in more nutrition, get to the gym, start that new project. We have this sense of initiation. And our yin energy, or the feminine, can be more introspective, internal. It's the part of us that can see and feel everything at once. We have this diffuse awareness. It's like having 67 tabs open on your computer. And have you ever, if you have a partner that has a more masculine energy, have you ever like been talking to them when they're watching the TV and they like literally don't hear you? And you're like, that's made up. That's not like, but that yang energy, that masculine energy excels more in like a single pointed focus. The yin side of us can be really reflective, can be really looking at like what's not working, but also is like magnetic and oriented toward relationships. So we also have a flux of both of these, which obviously affects our relationships, which obviously affects how we approach, care about, relate to other people. Okay. This was made by Chrissy Deuce, not a random Google person. So before we get into the seasons and the archetypes of each of these phases, that's really going to happen. I also want to emphasize that it's happening on multiple levels. So we have talked so much about feel much more aligned. Sorry, I'm just reading Chelsea's thing with my slower reflective or bleeding phases. Yes. So when I said like, generally speaking, you might love your follicular phase, you might like not, you might feel like I have all this energy and I don't want to do them. So you might have a preference. I haven't heard too many people whose preference is like the day before their period, but if that's you, please share your magic here. Okay, so before we get into those, I want to look at that all of these cycles are happening on multiple levels. So we've talked about orange circle menstruation that has all those seasons, but your magical body is also reflecting what's happening with the moon, that it is waxing, and then in its full moon is a mirror of your ovulation phase. And then it wanes through the luteal, and that new moon, that like just hint of a sliver of new light, is bleeding. It also has a mirror through the seasons of the earth. At springtime, summer, you could see when we first started the call that a lot of people didn't say like follicular or luteal. They said, I'm in the fall, I'm in the winter. That we also see the new life coming forth, that like bloom of summer, the dying away, and then that kind of flat stillness of winter. Creativity, our projects go through this. Kate Northrup, that's one of her tenets from her book Do Less, is that we ideate and we put it out into the world, and then we wrap it up and reflect, and then we rest in between, which often we skip. We often skip the rest part, and we're just like moving on to the next thing. Our growth phases. So something I've been talking about with a lot of clients and women is integrating, and we like throw that word around a lot without really talking about what that means. But essentially, it's a phase of resting from growth, resting from the search, resting from the unearthing, and just letting ourselves like be with the new version of ourselves, like practicing just living with what we already have. We have, in a sense, we have like a rhythm through our day. We have that morning, like bloom of the noon, the evening, and then that like stillness of night. And in our life stages. So mostly we're going to talk about through these archetypes, the menstruation and life stage. So through the first phase of our life, do you ever remember, oh, I want to see you for a second. Okay, let me talk about that so I can leave here. That we move through this maiden mother crone, but in there is like the wild woman. And that really mirrors the cycles that happen in our bodies on a monthly basis, is this arc of how we're living through our whole lives. Okay, so does anyone here ever feel like they miss the version of themselves that was just like young and hopeful and like not as many bad things and disappointments had happened to them? Bernadette has a very like bright and shiny, before the bright and shiny was gone. That most of us, and some of us have to leave that a little bit early, but we have this maiden and huntress phase. And we have that in macro through the first part of our lives. And we can still return to it through the smaller rhythms that we travel through. Okay. So I want to talk about each of these phases, and I want you to think about it specifically in your life phase and then in those menstrual phases that we've talked about. These slides get more exciting, so you're welcome. Okay. So this first one is, I guess, my curation of the maiden and huntress. So what comes up, like, what do you think of when you see these pictures? What traits? You can say with your real voice or type it in the chat. Goddess, warrior, independent,
Mysterious.
mysterious. Oh yeah, she's like real. I'm only responsible for myself vibes, powerful, sure of herself, strong. I probably leaned a little bit to determined. Totally. So I think that this ebbs a little bit through our lives. This is reflective of our follicular, like maiden and huntress. I would have said earlier in my life, I went full like maiden in my follicular phase. Like the earth is full of bright and shiny things and wonderful things happen. And that might be, I shouldn't have said that sarcastically, because if that's where you go, then that's fantastic. But we can also look at the first phase of our life where we are figuring some things out for ourselves. Whoever said like, oh, Jessica, like I'm only responsible for myself vibes, that can really be the huntress. If we look at the huntress archetypes in like goddess stories, she's usually a virgin goddess. Like she's just out there. Artemis is just out there like living her life. She's not interested in men. She's like interested in doing things. So obviously, if you were in a partnership, this can come into play. That, you know, you might not feel like you have a ton of energy for relationships when you're like, I have goals I'm working on. Or you might come back into this phase of feeling like this hope and renewal of springtime and wonder why that doesn't stay always. And like Chelsea said, I have a strong personal preference for here. I always have. I loved the renewal of like, the world really is a miracle, like Mary Oliver said. And now I would say I really love that kick of like energy to work on the things that are important to me. And you might, like the hands that were raised, feel like you have a personal preference for earlier in your life, before the bad things happened, when you had more like hope and openness to the world. But this isn't the only phase that has beauty and power. Okay, so what does this make you think of? What comes up when you see these pictures? Grounded and settled. Grounded. There's like really deliberately calm, wisdom, abundant and nurturing. Ooh, yes, abundant. People come for her truth, power, and femininity. Totally. I tried to choose images that felt really fertile, like, and it's not just the fertility of ovulation, of literal fertility, beautiful growth. It's this place of like, there is enough for me, there's enough energy for me, and there's enough energy for other people. There's enough energy, there's enough love for me and for the people that I'm loving and nurturing without it being extractive. And so a lot of those images are really tied into the earth with it, like its endless abundance. And mother is definitely a word that is really loaded, that brings up a whole range of emotions for people, and that might feel like a really heavy word, like, oh, mother means that like my sense of self is gone, or mother is this measurement that I never get to. But mother, in the sense of an archetype, is like blooming, is literally creating life. And this is an archetype I identify with really closely right now at this point in my life. And I don't have kids at all. I got a cat, very annoying. That's it. But this is a phase where I feel enough groundedness to bring things forth, that instead of the discovery and the doing as much in that maiden phase, in that huntress phase, and this phase of my life, like there is enough. I know enough to share. I know enough of who I am to come here with 60 people registered and only be like a little nervous and still feel like I have things to share, even with smart nurses on the call. And so whether this is literally about your children or people at all, the kids you teach at school, this phase of your life can be bringing things into fruition. And one thing that I want to emphasize here is that when we look at this on the macro of stepping in to these next phases, that's a decision and a choice that not everybody makes. Is that I'm sure everybody in this call has known women who got to be 70 years old and still didn't know how to have enough energy for themselves and to really hold someone else in presence. That moving through these phases is earned in a lot of ways, and not in the sense of earning your worthiness, but it's a little bit earned in the school of hard knocks, in the school of introspection, and the wisdom that life forces us to grapple with, to take the invitation or to not. But in the sense of our menstrual cycle, this is our ovulation, where we really actually literally are wired to connect to other people, to use our magnetism in the world. So I think it's a little rude that we only get like a couple days here. But even though that's true, you might as well like live them up. Plan all your dates then. Like do all your things. Plan all your friend dates then. Like this is the time where you are like just rigged to be out in the world. And this is also reflective in the season of summer. Wish this phase lasted longer. In the season of summer, which is like of all the seasons and the long, long winters, summer is where we are the best sometimes at just enjoying what is. You know, we have summer projects and like sometimes we just get derailed by laying on the sunshine and on the deck. Or like, this is the same with this phase, is that it's just this little flash and we don't have to spend our whole life moving to the next, producing things. This is also a beautiful time of just like being and enjoying life. To plan all those things that you actually love that make life meaningful here. Okay, this is actually my favorite one to talk about. Not so much my favorite one to live, but I'm working on it. Okay. So what does this bring up? What does this make you think of? Powerful, certain. Hardship, strength, discerning, famine. I would lose in a fight. Totally. Leader, warrior. Burn it down. Amen. I like to, yes, empowered, hard. No time for BS. Yeah, she's not effing around. She's just like, doesn't have time for it. And I think in so many ways, this phase is our most powerful because it is not what anyone has ever told us that we should be as women, ever. Right? This is where they make the jokes about like, oh, you wouldn't want to give a woman the nuclear codes or whatever. Like, this is where we get shamed from being cyclical beings, from living in this infradian rhythm that moves with the moon instead of that solar circadian rhythm of men that literally reset the same every day. This is where in a phase of life too, this is your perimenopausal, menopausal time where everything is shifting. And through the last recent history, that's often where society tries to like discard women, that you've lost your childbearing years and lost, like, this is the time where we're supposed to believe that we're not attractive anymore, that we are not like, that we're too emotional to be wise, that everything that we're talking about like what's not working and what we don't like is just because of our hormones, just because we can't be trusted, we can't trust ourselves. And when you look at all of those comments, this is the version that's like, I don't care. Like, I don't care anymore. Like, this isn't working and I have to say something. And there's power in that. And I loved the people that talked to about like hardship, strength, discerning, because it's not like, it isn't just gifted to us. You don't arrive in your 40s and notice, like, do you notice how many women get divorced in their 40s? And I'm not like advocating for that, like, but I am saying that often this is the point that women get to, that the tolerance for what isn't working is gone. And I purposely chose women for this slide, mostly looking at the one that was covered up. She looks a little young, that were older, that there's still lines on their face, well, maybe just one, And we can still see that beauty. Yet when we're in it, everything about society will tell us that that beauty isn't there anymore, that like radiance doesn't live in the wrinkles on our face, or like our soft kind of bloaty belly. It's where we really have to grapple with both our internal critic and the critical voices that we've heard our whole lives that have told us that we need to be like pleasant or productive or like fertile or pretty. Like everything that we've been told we have to be, in essence, has already burned down in this place. And there is so much power in recognizing that instead of always buying into the idea that you might be crazy. And I have a few rules for this phase for myself that I will share, because sometimes that discernment is tricky of like, is this my mind lying to me a little bit? Or is this something that's really not working? And when we're talking on the spectrum of masculine and feminine energy, that receptive, connective energy is obviously really high in our ovulation phase. And we almost start to like dissolve a little bit through this phase, that it's really easy to puddle a little bit here, you know, for our energy to have nowhere to go and to be a little leaky. I know that's maybe not the most helpful metaphor. And so bringing back to our sense of self and like really learning to discern on a really granular level what's true and what isn't can be really helpful. But this is also a phase where there isn't so much a rush. And that's the voice that I take issue with sometimes, is that I will make myself wait a little bit. So like, this isn't really working. And I'm going to keep noticing through this phase. I'm going to keep like, hey, yes, there does need to be an adjustment. You're right. I am not creating support for myself in this area. Maybe my relationship like isn't as good as it used to be. But also knowing that I am optimized for reflection, for really tough, reflection on my life, and that it can probably wait a week for decisions to be made. So sometimes this, for me anyway, maybe we should hear from Chelsea, who's probably better at this phase, it sounds like, is I am discerning about which things I take action on. Like, I'm not always going to break up with my partner like of years in this phase. Like, this might not be a split second, I am getting divorced. That maybe like those decisions of that gravity can maybe wait a week until we're in that more flat and even crone bleeding phase where the voices aren't so loud. So my rule for myself that I have shared is that it's not always that we can't trust the voices. It's maybe that we can't trust the volume. And so looking to see what remains can be really helpful.
Along those lines, Christy, I just finished a book that I cannot recommend enough. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of Harriet Lerner. Brene Brown quoted her. That's how I found out about her. But she wrote a book called The Dance of Anger. Oh, so good. It's exactly what you're saying. It's like, okay, and she doesn't specifically mention our menstrual cycle, but it's like in the subtext of, okay, you feel all this rising emotion and anger, and then she just walks you through exactly how to like make it mean something instead of just like flinging it at our lives. Do you know what I mean? It's totally. So beautiful.
And I think what ties in so perfectly with that too is that a big premise of her book too is that why she calls it a dance is that you can't continue in the same dance if one person changes the steps. And this is the time where you like don't care about the consequences so much. Like there is power in saying like, you know what, maybe I will burn my whole life down. And maybe you're not lighting a match at this moment, but you are really prepared to change the dance no matter the cost. And so taking that reflection that you're optimized for and using that in your follicular phase, it's way easier to sweep stuff under the rug. So holding yourself accountable to this version of you, this like fierce and wise and hard-earned, like hard-earned warrior part of you, is like you growing into her, moving the archetype here is the wild woman and the wise woman, kind of bridges to the crone. And this might not just happen in your intimate relationships. It might happen at work. It might happen just in society and culture, where you are being like the badass Viking lady with your sword when you refuse to go away. Like when you refuse to believe that your voice isn't important anymore. I remember one of my dear friends is 70, and she talked about when men stopping to help her change her tire, you know? And she was like, you used to be able to count on those guys, and you hit an age and no one cares about you anymore. They just want you to disappear. And she is such an amazing example to me of like not disappearing, of living this out. And we all lose when you believe the voices that say like, oh, it's just because you're menopausal. And like I said at the beginning, yes, support, health, all of it, make that a little easier on yourself. But if you notice in your cycle or in your life where you start noticing like this is not how it's going to be, we all lose when you don't believe her. Okay, last, we're almost done. Remember when I said this is just going to be an hour? I'm a dirty liar. Okay, what does this make you think of? Wisdom and experience. I will listen to what she has to say. Yes. Content. Still. Settled. Yeah. Mystic. Honest. Essentially, through these last two phases, natural, we are literally closer to intuition. Like that veil is thinner. Our whole like brain scans can see that. That we are far less concerned with what everybody else is doing, and relaxed ease, experience, and knowledge. And like we can be still concerned. You can be perioding in your bed and just hate yourself for not getting your whole list done. Like that's a choice. Or you can look at like, you know, it's hard to imagine these women on the screen like overdoing it in a day just so like, I don't know, their dad who's been dead for 40 years approves of how much they accomplished. You know, it's where we can choose to drop who we think we have to be. And we all love those poems of like the purple hat ladies and saying like, when I'm old, I'm just going to say whatever I think. And we can also make that choice to bring that crone, wise woman, medicine woman, like into our experience now. And especially during that menstruation phase of like opting out to some degree. And like I said at the beginning, probably don't get to opt out of everything. But it's okay to do your job and like not do more things for a couple days. It's okay to, I had one friend who like shared her menstruation calendar with her husband, and like those 3-day windows, she didn't make supper, like those responsibilities were distributed differently. And I don't pretend to know all those details of your life. But when you remember that in this winter where your hormones are flat, like some of her power too is that she's not wired to care what other people think about her anymore. Like her hormones aren't telling her to necessarily like go be in the world comes to her. She brings her contribution through her stillness. And so even if you were in the middle of like an upheaval in your hormones, headed toward that more like flat time of menopause, there is also its own power there of standing outside of the doing and relating a little bit. And you can feel that grounded wisdom and ease comes from having that such a sense of self that's also earned. You can stay a toxic maiden until you're 80 years old if you want. Or you can look at every turn through your body, through the seasons, through your creative project, through your life stages as spiraling you tighter into a really clear, crystallized voice of like who you are and who you can be, even if that, and especially if that is different than who you thought. Okay. So that is all of the end of just like my list of things. And I want to give you like, we are way over what I guessed where we would thought, but I have tons of time. So I want to give you choices that if you're like, I am done with these screens and want to return to my life, I love you. Thank you. If you have questions or sharing like of any kind, I promise you, I would go if we were 2 weeks from now and be like, see ya. But I got all the energy in the world. So if you have questions or just sharing that you'd like to bring into the group, now's the time. You can use your real voice or the chat.
Okay, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
It has a scenario to back it up. Okay, so I recently discovered sleep is real. You need it, right? We talked about that. Yeah. So I've like actually started to curate this life where I'm kind of a morning person. But in that, I've noted that I'm slightly less of a morning person in my luteal and menstrual phase. So it's like, I feel like the quality of sleep I get throughout the night is a little bit less good. And then also I need just a little bit more of it, like maybe half an hour, sometimes even an hour more sleep. Mm-hmm. So my question is, okay, how do I word this? Okay, so it works okay for me right now. I just get up a little later and I don't do as many things as I would normally do in the morning before my kids get up. But Hans, my husband, it just told me that I could pick whatever challenge I want for a month and he would do it. And so I want to do like a specific challenge that would allow him to get up in the morning with me, because I think that would be really fun to like try that out. Because right now we're on totally different sleep schedules because I changed, he didn't. He's like, you're crazy. Okay, so how do I'm wondering, is it like a cop out fake that I can just get up at the same time and then nap during the day just to like be a good example? Or do I need to be strong and like, no, this is my cycle and I just need to get up at a later time, even in the midst of this challenge that I'm going to make? Sorry, that was really long.
No, I got it. Thank you, Larissa. Love you. Okay, so I think it's really important and helpful sometimes to look at your energetic calories as a little bit finite during that luteal phase. I think you can bend and play with them a little bit more earlier.
Yeah.
But you just are beholden to your, like the volume that you have a little bit more. So I wouldn't say it's a cop out at all. I think if you are going to like keep that rigid of your wake up time, then it just will require adjustment somewhere else of like going to bed earlier or taking a nap. Like, I don't think that's a cop out necessarily, as just an experiment. Like, oh, can I make up for this if I take a nap in the afternoon? How do I feel?
Yeah, and especially if it's just a month, it's like, well, it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah. And two, if like just for that month you want to keep the same wake up time and you're not feeling as good, then maybe that looks like just going to bed a little bit earlier or like taking it a little easier, whatever. Just like, if that's the line that you want to hold, then where else can you play a little bit with it? Same with like, if you have to get up for work, then like that's not yet in our society does it work too many places to be like, I'm gonna be an hour late because I don't wanna.
Yeah.
It's just like, then you find the play somewhere else.
Yeah, totally. I think I was stressed about going to bed earlier because I already seem like a crazy person for how early I've started going to bed compared to how I used to sleep. And so it's like, it's just too much to go to bed half an hour, an hour earlier than that. But I think you just need to not be too worried about the crazy person part of things and just be who you need to be. Yeah.
Everything about that phase and the next phase is about embracing crazy person. Right. Like,
and that's what's hard for me. I think that's why are you still on here, Chelsea? Can you tell us how to do better at the luteal phase? Because I like suck at it so bad. I just like get so stressed when my capacity goes lower. I hate it. But I think it comes to that like over functioning and thinking that's like who you are,
With Chelsea's arriving, one thing that has helped me is naps are not a cop out there. Life. Yes, 30-day challenges are masculine energies. Yes.
Right, so exactly.
If that's the structure that you want to hold, then where can you find a play? One thing that helps me deal with the decline a little bit is because through the first part of my phase, I still sleep and stuff, but like, I am a superhero. I feel like if you look like a regular repeating everyday like man energy, me at the beginning has more and it just kind of balances out. Then I'm going to have less, but like over the whole, it's about the same amount, I think. And I think that's true for a lot of women that I know, is that you might feel real stressed about the less. But I handled the less better by, and not just like productivity. I don't want to measure energy just in productivity. That can also look like coming up with ideas, just like bringing enthusiasm to the group, like whatever it is. I feel like I'm higher than average being man, which is like the whole thing, and then lower and it evens out. Yeah, we're saying no. Yes, Byrne said, I'm a big believer in taking all the sleep that you need, but I'm also a teacher, so you have to get up. Lean into the naps on the days that I need it. Another radical thing that I did, and this happened relatively recently in my life, embarrassingly enough, was that I just decided that I'm actually not lazy or an oversleeper. And I think that's true for most people. Like, I don't, like, I just sleep how much I need. And I have the flexibility that I can do that. Like, I just wake up when I wake up. But I used to like would wake up at 8 and immediately hear my dad's voice of like 8 o'clock is sleeping in, you know, that sort of stuff, and be like, oh, I'm such a bad. And when I just decided like, oh, I'm not an oversleeper, I sleep however much I need, then the naps, this sleeping however much you need to sleep is like just not so dramatic when you don't think it's a character flaw or a moral failing.
I read a book
Sleep
last
was-
year called Rest is Resistance. And it was really, I mean, some of it was woo-woo for sure. But
Welcome here,
some of
Burns.
it was really fascinating. And if you struggle with like resting enough because you feel guilty, it's like I had a mother who, like, I don't think she stopped, but I'm not that girl.
Yeah.
But I felt guilty about it. I get the thing where you talk about your dad's voice in your head, but
Yeah.
like it's resistance, right, to the kind of society that we're in, this driven
Mhm.
society. So I found it really fascinating.
Yes, and building on what Burns said, when I talked at the beginning about how like gathering is revolutionary. Oftentimes we're bought into stories about like, well, my grandma didn't get to have a nap. And guess what? That sucked for her. Like, are you helping her by also overfunctioning? Oh, my aunt grandma didn't have any support and she had 7 kids. You know, she did it all alone. Okay, so you not asking for support, like, are you? Often we're like tied into these stories that actually are not helping us, and were harmful to like the people who lived it. And I can say that with like a sarcastic look on my face, but it's a really big excavation to weed those out and where they come from. Yes, Cami, I'm coming back to your question too. Thanks, Kristen, for reminding me. We'd never tell a toddler they sleep too much. Rest allows for growth. Yes, and like also we kind of get bought into these really like mathematical equations for our lives. And like, oh, I shouldn't be so tired. Like you said that, I know you have. And it's the point that Jen talked about sleep being cumulative, but it's also about like how much energy people cost you that day. If you are grieving, if you are like figuring out stuff in your life, like it's not so mathematical, your energy. And just taking away that one point of like letting yourself be actually tired, it can, instead of adding in that like, oh, I shouldn't be so tired, why I gotta go to bed so early, is another point of real powerful resistance. Okay, Cami asked my thoughts about birth control. I don't want to pretend to have a ton of education there. I think pill birth control is probably like the least, it messes with your natural systems the most. And I think that there's, in other forms, there's a balance between like, oh, guess what also costs me a lot of stress and energy? Worrying about getting pregnant. Like that's a real thing. So I would probably give you some people to learn from who have more particular advice on that. But I think there are options that are less disruptive. And part of, I think, what we're coming to now is like a big, when you think of like the pill birth control, it was often prescribed to like balance your hormones too. And essentially that meant take away the flux. And I think we're coming here with the knowledge of like the flux isn't always bad. And there are other ways to like support your hormones that are a lot better and less damaging. So I don't want to say like, oh, talk to your doctor. But talk to someone. I think Aviva Romm talks a lot about birth control, and like there are options where you're tracking your cycle, and but like I said, the stress of that might be not worth it. So
the biggest thing that I would change about my life in that way, if I were to do it over again, was to start learning how to track my cycle when I like first got my period. That's when I had time. Like that's when I had the emotional and physical energy to like think about my period in great detail, but I didn't have anything to think about because no one ever taught me anything. So like I know someone who charts her cycle so well and is so in tune with it that she's been able to plan her babies so seamlessly around that because she knows her body so well, and she checks her like basal metabolic temperature or whatever it is. I don't even know the words, but like she just knows. And I think that like teaching the next generation how to do those things and how to be in tune with their body is a really good first step in like giving them options anyways, more options.
There is another app called Natural Cycles, I believe, that it tracks your cycle just for like fertility, whether that's birth control or trying to get pregnant, and you're measuring your basal metabolic temperature. I know another teacher that teaches like testing the viscosity of your cervical fluid for when you're fertile. So it really is like, how much you want to put into it, like the payoff, the benefits and the negatives, and how much energy you have to direct toward it. I want to get to Chelsea's and sharing Tina's comment too, but I want to say this before I forget. 2 really important things. First of all, I had a lot of questions about how do you track your cycle. I will tell you how I do it. We've talked about a couple of like other apps. I use the Stardust app. I love it. Oh, Chelsea loves it too, because it tells you if you're a purple witch or a pink witch or something, like where you're bleeding as opposed to the moon. So if you remember the chart a few times back, like the moon is doing the same thing. And if you talk to people that work in healthcare, even the non-wooiest of them will tell you that people get crazy on the full moon. Like it literally has effects on our bodies as like water creatures. So I love the Stardust app. It's free. And they also, on principle, like they don't share your data anywhere. Stardust. There was a big thing, especially like when Roe v. Wade was turned over, about like noting the apps that share your data. And it's probably easiest if you have an iPhone, you can track your cycle through the health app. But that also isn't secure if that's a concern. But sometimes that's easiest, that you can just kind of look where you are when you will be starting like work at what point. The Stardust app gives you a lot more information and like funny messages about like just being a raging swamp monster or something. So I also like that too. And just kind of tells you what to expect from your energy. And so having a general idea of those phases, and just having the visual data to look at like, oh, that's what's happening. Like I said, I can feel mine like the day that it drops. So I don't have to track it so intimately anymore, but even after a couple months of just even putting in like the first day of your period, you'll start to like see and recognize your own patterns. The second thing that I want to say really quickly is that I have taught this. It kind of became surprising that I started teaching so much about cycles. It started at a live event that I did, that I had a whole class planned, and I briefly mentioned this, and like the whole group was like, excuse me, what? And we spent like 2 hours just talking about this, and I was like, oh, like this is a thing people need to know. And since then, it has become very common language with a lot of people that I work with to talk about cycles. Well, I think it maybe is just because I'm in my fall or winter, and that's why I think my husband is terrible and that we don't have a relationship. This is not another way to shame yourself for not doing it enough. And this will never, like, understanding this rhythm won't fix problems if they are there. That I always want to include that disclaimer for the fact of, like, yes, sometimes in that fall, our critical voice gets really loud, but it's not always crazy. And pulling out what's true there and actually acting on it, even when you move to the next phase where you could ignore it a little more, sweep it under the rug, like knowing your cycle will not shift if there's something big that needs to be shifted. Okay, I want to share just what Tina put in the chat, and then Chelsea. I haven't forgotten. I'm glad you're not holding your real hand up so long, like it's cool. Okay. Tina shared from Dr. Patrick Flynn about women and sleep, that women have longer circadian rhythms, that men need 7 to 8 hours and women need 8 to 10. That their sleep cycles are similar, but cortisol goes down and melatonin goes up sooner in women than men. That it peaks, melatonin peaks for women at 9 and doesn't peak for men until 10 or 11. So if you feel like you're always the one that wants to go to bed earlier, yes. And there's tons of things that can throw off your circadian rhythm, like your morning light and when you exercise and things like that. And hormones play a higher, what's the person? Dr. Patrick Flynn. That hormones mess with your sleep. There's one night during my period, like I'm such a good sleeper. I always can go to sleep, except one night during my period that it's hard for me. So yes, your hormones mess with your sleep and are affected by your sleep. A woman's body is building up that hormonal fuel tank between 9 p.m. and 1 a.m. Dang it. That if she's going to bed very late, it's depleting her hormonal reserves and can lead to health problems, and it doesn't affect men in the same way. Yes, if you look at the differences in research, even like on cold plunging, like Dr. Andrew Huberman just posted, like, it makes men way skinnier and doesn't seem to affect women at all. So one thing that's really interesting in Alisa Vitti's book, In the Flow, is she really does talk about how a lot of the advice that's out there actually doesn't affect women in the same way. That if you are doing like really long intermittent fasts through your whole cycle, that's going to be really disruptive to your hormones where it wouldn't for men. Just things like that is one particular example that I remember. Okay, Chelsea.
Good thing I don't cold plunge to be skinny.
Yeah.
I do it because I love it. Okay, sorry. I just feel like I want to double back because my kids kept picking me off the call and Jen was asking me. This is what I think about the luteal and the bleeding phase. I think we've lost the vision, and they are the feminine times. Like, they are what represent us as that yin, and we have lost the ability to value them. We have a very prescribed idea of and so my advice is redefine what you think productive is, because I think in my life, the things that most people makes them feel really productive, I'm just like get exasperated by them because I'm like, cool, I cleaned my house again, woohoo, I'll do it again. Whereas the productivity that I feel in those slow down phases, like those things feel deeper to me. When I have a dream that feels very interpretive or very likewise, or if I have a night where I stay awake and I just feel clarity, like when I'm really looking at my life from a place of not just like, hey, go do it. Let's go do it. And I'm like pulling back and I'm saying, what is really here? And what does my heart really want? And what do I need? Those are powerful times. So in my mind, that type of productivity, like you can't like, yeah, go set the goals and go do the things and make the the dates on the calendar, like do that all in that spring and summer. It's beautiful, it's sunny, it's sunshiny, but there's stuff that happens in those deep nights of life, of your month and of your cycle that you can't learn in the sun. You just can't.
Mm-hmm. I'm so glad you doubled back there. That's such a beautiful illustration. If you remember those pictures of the last 2 slides too, I want to like share a story that I was going to then, but then was rushing. The oldest recorded story that we have in humanity written down is the story of Inanna, which I love sharing with groups. And essentially it's about a queen that's up in the upper world, right? She's living in the springtime in the sun, all the accolades for who she is above ground. And the quick version is she wants to go visit her sister underneath, like who's the queen of the underworld. And as she descends, she loses everything that she thinks makes her a queen above, like her robes and her crown, like her tools, everything she's taken with her is stripped away as she gets to the underworld. And she thinks when she gets down there that it will be this like reunion of sorts. And instead, her sister Ereshkigal is wailing about her dead husband and hangs Inanna on meat hooks for 3 days. And over the arc of our lives, we come to descents. And it's like in the hero's journey, you have this invitation. The hero has the invitation to like leave the village and go and do things. And in the heroine's journey, we have the invitation to descend, to look what's underneath. Underneath everything that we think makes us bright and shiny up above, all the doing and the being and the like cheerful and the hopeful and like the agreeableness. And the beautiful part of the story too is that she stays on the meat hooks until she listens to Ereshkigal, and like her servant, her helper comes down, and they really listen to Ereshkigal wailing. And that is part of our journey as well, is that Ereshkigal is actually just a mirror for Inanna. All the darkness, all of the wild, like crazy emotional part of her that's actually alerting her to what needs to be heard from her soul. And it's only after that happens that she can ascend again, but she comes up new. She isn't the same Inanna that descended. She is adorned completely differently. She has a totally different set of tools to serve her as an even more powerful queen above ground. And when you think about, like, that's what I wanted to bring up, the example of like women in their 40s who are getting divorced, who like blow up their whole lives. You can stay, right? Like, we don't have to take that descent. You can bite your tongue. You can like try to claw your way to stay above ground through those waning weeks into your luteal phase, or you can take the invitation to go to the depths, to be in the night, to be in the darkness, to examine who you are without what you get gold stars for above ground. And I think Chelsea just like put that into personal experience, what that can feel like. She said, when you know how to descend and how to ascend, then you won't feel like you need to dig deep in the darkness, because you know we are way back to the sun. Every month, every year, we get to practice. And that descent is where the depth comes from. And you know, when you have talked to women that have depth, and it doesn't mean that everything has been sunshine and like upper world for them. It means they've taken the invitation to the descent and brought that knowledge, integrated that knowledge with them when they come back. And on the micro, we have this invitation by our beautiful magical bodies to do it monthly, to do it over the course of our life. More questions or shares? Just big likes for Chelsea's comment. It was real good. Of course, you'd put poetry in the chat. Okay, Kristen's done. Are we done? About premenopausal? If you gotta go, go. Go with all my love. I don't know, Chelsea. Dana's above question. Sorry, I missed a Dana question. Oh, can you talk on women tracking their cycles when they no longer get a period? Yes, I can. So there are like, for sure, instances where that can happen. Hysterectomies. If you have an IUD, you're still having the same hormones shift, just with, you might have lost like your bleeding. So you would still see if you can find some markers of like, sometimes you might have like a trace of a period or something, like something to track your hormones. Thank you. Or if you've just like stopped, if you are menopausal, you are in this crone phase where you, not always, you can be young and be in your mother phase. So if you've had a hysterectomy, but your body will most likely, you can look at the ebbs and flows of the moon, like that will probably be more operative, and looking at the actual seasons that you're in, like what's happening with the earth, what's happening with the moon. Where am I in a creative project? You would look to like which of those things is most reflective of your energy, and track the moon a little more closely. So following that cycle of the waxing moon, of the springtime and the full moon, and then the waning moon and the dark moon. Any other things? Okay. Yes, teach your teens so much. Can you just imagine if you knew this when you were 17? I cannot.
I started writing like a little book that I'm going to give to my girls, and I'm so excited. It's going to be amazing.
Thank you all so much for being here. It is just like so meaningful to gather and talk about like ancient body wisdom, and know that you will proliferate this further. Thank you for spending so much of your precious time here. And I love you, and I will see you soon. You can unmute yourselves if you want before you go and just say bye into the group.
Hi, Christy. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Lovely.